Hello there, my name is Kay Byfield, and this is your ArtSpeaks Studio moment from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas. Last week we talked about watercolor painting supports, paper, Yupo, watercolor boards, and although I don't have any watercolor boards to show you because I don't use them, I do want to acknowledge that that is a possible surface you might try. This week, we're going to talk about the surfaces that you will be dealing with if you're using archival materials that are well established for painting in watercolor. And I would like to demonstrate the way the paint acts on those surfaces. So as I explained last week, there are three surfaces for watercolor paper. There's rough paper, which is the way the paper comes off of the felt and the screen when it is originally made. There's hot press paper, which is when a hot roller is rolled over the paper after it is fully dry. And there's cold press paper, which is used when a cold roller is rolled over the paper. Rough paper has much more texture, much more surface tooth. Cold press is the intermediate between hot press and rough paper, and because the roller is cold, it smooths down some of the texture, but not all of it. And hot press is very smooth because the roller is hot. Yupo is the smoothest of all. It is absolutely smooth, but it also has no absorbency at all, and all the paint sits on the surface. So today I want to show you how those different surfaces work when you're actually doing a painting.
So this is a sheet of rough paper, and one of the things that is really cool about rough paper is that because it has so much texture, if you remove excess water from your pigment, when you take it across the surface, you get what we call dry brush. And dry brush just means that because the water is running out as you go across the surface, the pigment sits on the tops of the texture and doesn't go in between as it did right here at the beginning of the stroke. So that's called dry brush, and that texture could be really fun to include in your painting. So in addition to simulated texture, which we find commonly in watercolor, you also have actual texture. Another thing I'd like to show you with the difference in the surface quality is the way that the paint goes on if you're trying to make a large shape on the different surfaces. So I've wet this square, and now I'm painting into it. So this is a sheet of cold press paper, and I want to try the dry brush again with this. And you can see that I can do the dry brush, but the texture is a little bit smaller, not quite as big as the texture was in the other. And when I paint a large shape, like I did on the other one, it goes on much smoother, much easier than it did with the rough paper. With the rough paper, I had to keep going back and filling it in because it was skipping over parts of the paper. And this is a sheet of hot press paper, which means that the hot roller was run over it and it's smoothed out. And what you can see when I try to do dry brush on this, there's hardly any texture at all. And in fact, it's even kind of smooth. When I try to cover the paper with paint with hot press, notice how much easier that is. Now let's watch what happens with Yupo when we try to do dry brush. There's no dry brush to it at all. And when I tried to pick up the excess paint here at the end, I just created a place where the paint went away completely. And when I tried to paint a large shape and cover it completely, the paint doesn't adhere. And I have to keep adding more and more paint, but the paper is resisting the paint. As you can see, there's a big difference in the way that the paper takes the paint. If you use a marker, there's a difference in the way that the paper takes the marker as well. That was rough. This is cold press. This is hot press, which is good for drawing. And this is Yupo, which is just really fun to draw on. But notice that the Yupo, I wasn't able to create a shape that had a form to it, that the paper is just resisting it, and I've been waiting quite a while and it won't dry. So detail is really good on Yupo and on hot press. It's pretty good on cold press, but it's really more difficult on rough paper. Artists use rough paper if they want that natural texture, and I find a lot of landscape painters and people that are painting non-objective abstraction really enjoy rough paper. Cold press is a nice segue between hot press, which does some different things, and rough. So it gets the best of both worlds. You get the texture to some extent that you get on rough paper, but you can also get those smooth washes. And if you want to, you can show your brush strokes with cold press. But if you want your brush strokes to show, hot press is much better. And of course, with Yupo, you have no choice but to show your brush strokes. And here is the same painting done with 4 different surfaces. I'm not sure it comes through on the camera that well, but with the rough paper, I had to work a little harder. The washes, once it went on the paper, it was very hard to get it back off again. But I get nice smooth washes if I work hard with it. With the cold press, I can leave some of the texture of the way the paint is applied, and you'll notice that it looks a little bit brighter than it did on the rough paper, and that's because the rough paper scatters the light rays, and so the colors don't look as bright. With the smooth paper, the hot press paper, it was much easier to let the water make some texture in the paint. It's a little brighter still because it's smooth. And with the Yupo, it was very difficult to get any detail at all because the paper itself resists the paint and it sits on the surface. You get a really interesting textural quality, but the downside is that if you paint on Yupo, people are going to look at it and go, oh, she has Yupo. And in general, that's not what we want people to do with our paintings. We want the painting to be something that attracts attention, and then somebody says, oh, I bet that's Yupo, would be a much better way to go. In any case, it's just lovely. But if you want to actually have shapes that hold their own, it's difficult. After experimenting with these papers, an artist can choose which one best fits what they're trying to accomplish in their own work. As I said, Yupo is lots of fun to paint on, but it's also pretty frustrating. I think rough paper is great for the kinds of things that the artists want to do with that. In general, most painters select cold press because it gets the best of all worlds, and you can get detail, and you can get some interesting paint quality, and you can easily cover the surface. Hot press is a lot of fun. That's my favorite right now, but like all artists, I tend to switch back and forth depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. In any case, I hope that you find the right surface for you. I hope that you pay attention to the surface because it makes a difference in your paintings. And I hope you continue to have fun. And I wish you happy painting.